All right, so I want to talk to you about how the tech tree system works inside of RTS21. So I've developed a lot of them in the past, and most of them felt really complicated. Especially like a basic tech tree is just a tree node structure. So the coding concept is there, and it's been around for a while. But most RTS games have flexibilities where they can have certain levels turn off features, enable features, change features out with different ones, and trying to create a node structure that allows for these various twisted complexities becomes really complex to try to manage everything with. And the ones that seemed to work the best were always the simplest, where there were separate things that just kind of took care of themselves in little ways, but then interconnected so that they created a larger structure at the end. So I want to show you how this works for us. So I have down here, I have a drone, which let me click into here and move so we have the drone selected. And then this is our actions menu. What things can we do? Which right now is nothing because we have nothing selected. If I click this building, I can see that I can produce a mini tank. So there's my mini tank, and I can send him off that way. And he might start shooting at something if he notes an enemy. Oh yeah, there's an enemy. So he's going to start shooting at that enemy. Oh, I set the range too short, whatever. Anyway. Yep, so he's firing at him, but it's going to take a little bit because he's got a lot of... Okay, so if I select my drone, then I can see that I can create a base, and I can add this base somewhere. So let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit and put it over here. So, and it's a different building. I know that I'm doing some tests and editing right now. Okay, so back to this one. I don't have the ability to build a factory right now. So what do I need to do? Well, I happen to have the Boolean option is here. So current value is true. If I unselect it and reselect it, it's at that point of selection that they decide whether to show up or not. But if I click this, then all of a sudden I have both my base and my factory that I can produce. So I can zoom out in the middle of a tree and put another factory here, select it, and have it produce more tanks. Which I had several, and I have some other issues to work out with those. But the point is that the tech tree works. So let's take a look at what actually happens, how the structure works. So first of all, I'm going to stop this, and let's go find the canvas. This is the canvas that actually has the actions. So if I double click that, here they are. I can see them in my scene. There's my map. But here's the items, and I have all of the buttons here already. All of the buttons. I remember a lot of times I would create these, and I would have in the tech tree, it would actually control what image was supposed to show up on the button, what event was supposed to be called when that happened, and what scripts or objects were tied to it. And so it got really large to manage and add any new item inside of there. This way it becomes a lot simpler. It can become a little difficult to track things down if you're unaware of the setup. So let's go over it. Let's pick one. Let's pick drone, or let's pick base, whether or not we can create a base. Everything in here is really normal. In fact, if I click the actions, you can see that it's just using a layout group. So if I were to, say, delete one or disable one, the other ones just correct themselves and line back up. And when I put it back in, and now they all just line themselves back up. And that's because of the grid layout. So a grid layout group. So that takes care of the UI. And it reorders things as I need to, which right now is just keeping the order that I put them in here. So I put the earliest items first, the more advanced items later. So on this drone, we see it just has all the normal stuff. We have a material, a renderer, an image, a button, a transform, and then one script here. Now this is the script that effectively makes the tech tree work. Now, there's a whole bunch of other little pieces, as we'll see in a minute. But let me show you this. So the first thing is the actual button itself. So we've got the button selected. In fact, I'll select that one. It kind of shows the whole area for it. But then it has these two custom things attached to it. Can create a drone. This is an enable button state. So what do we enable the button state on? Well, we enable it on a Boolean and gate variable. That is a custom thing that I have generated for this. And what happens when we click it? We call this create drone event variable. So it really comes down to these two things. Can we create a drone? And how do we create a drone? What do we do to tell a drone to get created? So let's start at the beginning. Let's take a look at, can a drone be created? Now, this is going off to a scriptable. So if I click this, I have to be over in my project, not my hierarchy. In fact, to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to split these out so we can see both for right now. Okay. So can create drone. If I click on can create drone, I can see that this is actually a selection of values. Oh, sorry, it's base. Can create base that I wanted to look at. But create base has two different values that it's looking at. Now, these are observables. So if you're not familiar with observables, the basic idea is that you don't have to use update in your code to keep checking it, to check a state. Instead, you tie up an event. And when this value changes, if it actually changes to something different as opposed to someone setting a false variable to false again, it triggers an event saying, hey, my state changed. Here's the new state. And so in these cases, it's passing a true or false value. So if the drone is selected, that's the first one. And then the second one is the base learned. So have we researched the base? Do we know how to create one? So if we have a drone selected and we know how to create a base, then that button will be enabled. So what actually generates those? What sets those variables? Well, base learned right now, we don't have any tech stuff in there to start enabling those. But it would be very simple, because let me show you this. This is based off of base learned, which is right here. And it's just a Boolean value. Something else can set this to true, and that basically would be the idea that you start out the level and we have all of your capabilities enabled or activated, or you didn't have it when you started out the level and then you researched it somewhere. One of the other buildings ends up giving you how to research it, or you steal the tech from another player. So if I go back to can create base, we see that there's also another one. Drone selected. Let's go over to the drone for a minute. Here's the drone, and I'll just zoom in on it. That is not very close. Let's zoom in like that. Okay, so we have this drone, and then it's got these events, on select and on unselect. This is the key to the whole thing here. When the drone gets selected, it is setting a variable called drone selected. That was it. That is all that it does. You select it and it does it. Now, this is a special one called event gated when the player is not human. So basically, if if the unit doesn't belong to you, it doesn't count as a drone is being selected. Even though a drone is selected, but it's not yours. You can't do anything with it. Okay, so we aren't triggering the drone. All right, so instead, let's go back to that. So we were seeing that this is setting the drone selected, and it's also setting how many units are selected. And one of the things that, just to let you know, if you have multiple items selected, like multiple drones selected, and then you change the selection by adding one or removing one, but you still have them in there, you're not going to trigger this unselected event. You will trigger them individually, but basically it triggers all of the unselects first, and then it triggers all of the selects. That way, when you change your group size, your group composition, it flushes everything out of your selection, and then it reselects it all. Okay, but that happens within a single frame, so you never even see it. Okay, so anyway, this is changing drone selected, which if we go over to drone selected selection, we could also see that from can create base, that's where it's called. So those are the variables that tie into it. Is the factory learned, or is the base learned, and is the drone selected? If those are both true, back in our actual drone, or not our drone, but our UI to create a base, that will return true, and this will enable the button. The actual script here is really small. This is it, right here, this whole thing. It's just these lines. So first of all, where's the button? Second of all, Where's that Boolean gate variable, the one with multiple Booleans underneath it to decide whether or not? It'll return a state. So we can say we're adding a listener called setState. That's this one. So when the state changes, then it's just going to take this game object and set it active according to the state. Is it active? Then true. If it's not active, then false. So it's setting it active or inactive. And then it also has one other thing, the event variable. So if it gets clicked, then we are triggering the event variable. Of course, it can't be clicked if it's not if the whole object is disabled. All right. So that leads us to our next part, which is the event. We've tracked down what sets this. Which I should express where these things are stored and its structure. Under RTS21, we see a folder called data. And then underneath that, we have different folders of this. In this case, I have tech tree. And then under tech tree, we have different areas. So the ones that we were first seeing is player tech tree. Okay, can create base, can create drone, can create factory, etc. And then underneath that, those ones are calling onto other ones. So we can see and expand out what those are. What's researched, what units are selected for the player, and then here are some of the create calls for them. This is the next part. Okay, so, inside of here, I'm going to select that base one, or not base, factory. Now, when I say create factory, that one wasn't working. So can create factory, something in here was returning false. So in this one, I'm going to go to factory learned, and I can see that was false. I think I already set this and corrected it in the game. But anyway, it's just having this value changed to true ends up giving you the ability, along with having selected one of your drones to do it. Okay. Next, the event. We're going to the event part of it, so I'm going to go over to the base, and we say it's got create base. Okay, here's create base. Well, what's happening with this create base? Create factory is the one I wanted to track down. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say, where did it go? Find references in scene. So I find the references in scene, and then it's got a whole bunch of stuff here where we can see various things that are referencing this. Now, how and what don't always make sense, but some of them do. Like mini tank level 1. Why that has any reference to on create, I don't know. I think it's going by script, but anyway, so we have drone level 1. A drone can create a factory. So I can see that we have these drones here. And then inside of this, if I scroll down, we see something called unit construction response. And this is listening to the create base event, and this one is listening to the create factory event. So if that factory event gets triggered, it has prefab information. For the outline prefab, which was that transparent one that I can just drag around and set somewhere, and it has no functional capabilities, no armor, no units paying attention to it. And then also the complete prefab that I can put in there. Now, the complete prefab is not technically the complete prefab. That is the construction prefab. I should probably correct it to that. So the construction prefab is one that when you put it there, it will change itself out. So the construction prefab starts, and that has instructions and scripts that help pull in the drones to start building it and put pieces in the right spots until it's built, and once it's completed, it replaces itself with the complete factory. Okay, so there would be another prefab sitting in between there. Anyway, I don't have that in place right now. But you can see that this script is doing this. Now let's take a quick look at the code for it. So we have that unit construction event, which is from an event variable. Let's go to this and find out what's happening. So it's an input, this.input.construction unit event.add listener. So we're listening to it and attaching it to the construction request. So when someone clicks that button, it fires on here. And I go to, F12. So one of the big things that I do is this is technically getting fired with every single drone that I have. And the big thing is, if this interactions is selected, if this unit is not selected right now, it exits out. We don't want that one. So then we get the iConstruction Finder Manager. So this is one of our managers that actually deals with placing a building. And we tell it begin finding a spot. We pass in this unit, who actually created it, because they're going to be the ones called on to go construct it. And then we're going to say this.prefabs.outline prefab. That's that first one, so we can drag it around and we just get the transparent shader. And then the next one, which is the complete prefab. So we're passing off the full responsibility of creating it now to the manager. But it was that unit that had the capabilities to do it. So the unit is the one that decides. We may have a very special case where we have a hero unit that can construct things that no other unit can. Or that when the hero unit is the one who's asked to go do something, that they've got other information about how they can do it faster. So there's reasons that we could change everything out based on the unit or which unit type that you've got. Okay. So that's effectively the tech tree. We have a series of Boolean values that get changed by various things, such as is a unit selected, is a tech researched. And then we have a button that listens to that to decide whether or not to show up. We already have a selection system to decide what is selected, to find out is this unit selected, which drones are selected. And then it creates a command to send those off and produce the new object. And it calls an event, and that's it. So we could have all sorts of things. In fact, the attack commands, for instance, can be put in there as well in this exact same structure. And we can have can attack, can units attack. And that decides, do any of the units you have selected, can they attack? And if they do, if you have tanks, then yes, they can. And you get the little attack target icon to show up. So all of our stuff that would show up in there as potential actions would just be additional buttons that we add that just have two things that they look at. Three, technically, the button itself, the listener, the Boolean variable listener to decide whether or not we can put it there, and the event to fire if somebody presses it. And then otherwise, those are relatively custom code. We have a lot of options on how that gets managed. Initially, the prefabs are structured and set up in a way that we can just have a full game where everything is set up. But here's a change that will likely come to this. So right now in our code, in our project, we have this stuff where it's like can create drone, where we've got all the tech tree right here. But I'm thinking we'll probably create an element for the tech tree itself. Or maybe even put in a separate set of Boolean variables here that is literally level has feature enabled. And so each one of these might have level has drones enabled, level has base enabled, level has factory enabled, level has mini tank enabled. And that can turn off all these features just to a particular level, even though the players earned the right to use them now. Okay, but that tech isn't in there yet. It will likely be coming though. Otherwise, that's how the tech tree works here.